First question, tell me one thing you do to create your best year ever.
First thing I do is intentionality. Very intentional about how I spend my time, where I spend my time, who I'm spending it with. Everything is intentional because I think if you're not intentional, you're not going to be able to focus on creating the best year ever.
Oh, Bob, you are speaking my language, my friend, because when you start from intentionality, as you talked about, the rest of your life can flourish. And oh, are we going to be getting in on this episode? And welcome to Best Year Ever, a podcast that inspires growth and impact so you can create your best year ever. And I'm your host, Rob Cressy. And joining me today is Bob McIntosh, co-founder of 3 Degrees Consulting. He is also the host of the Get Out of Your Own Way Now show podcast. Bob, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me here. I'm very excited about this.
And you and I are doing a home and home series. I was just on your podcast last week. It went so well. And I was like, we got to run this bad boy back. And it actually stems from the conversation that you and I had after the show, because I love to be on podcasts and have people on to legitimately build relationships with others. And you started to tell me a little bit more about your story. And I was like, Bob, do you talk about that a lot on your podcast? And you're like, I've actually never talked about this. I was like, what? You're telling me the story you're telling me you don't talk about with others? So what we're going to be talking about a lot in this episode is lifestyle design and creating what you want in your life and the process for making that happen. And certainly with your first answer of intentionality being the thing, Bob, welcome to the show.
Yeah, this is going to be good. Like I said, I'm excited to share this. And it's funny how a moment post podcast after our actual recording is what created the opportunity for this.
Yes. So I will actually start with the question that you asked yourself. And it's a question that I've asked myself as I look at lifestyle design and moving from Pittsburgh to post-college, not going back home, and then living in Cincinnati, and then moving to Chicago, which was a dream of mine, and then more recently moving to Sarasota, Florida to start a family. And Bob, you asked yourself the question, if I could go anywhere, where would it be? Can you sort of unpack this in the story of why you asked yourself this?
Yeah, so this actually starts out from all the way back to college. And so I got a really good job, after college, just before I started my business. But they said, all right, we have offices in these cities. So, I got to pick the city, but it wasn't necessarily, which was Chicago, in fact. And so I started off living in Chicago, but it wasn't really, my choice in the sense of, hey, I picked from these options, but it wasn't because of any other thing than this is what the options that were given to me were. And then I ended up moving to New York City for my, at that time, girlfriend to become wife, now ex-wife, but and then the two of us moved to LA because she was in the film business. So everywhere that I've lived, every city rather that I've lived in has been not fully my choice. And this is not to say that I was unhappy in any of these places. I very much enjoyed all of them. I mean, I lived in New York for 4 years. I lived in Chicago for a year, and LA for 10 years. So there was nothing that was like inherently like, hey, this is bad. But it was also, there was never like just openness of like, hey, if I could go anywhere, where would it be? And I'd never actually asked myself that. Like, I ended up leaving my apartment in LA and was just like, okay, if I'm not going back to LA, where else would I go? And, it's like weird to ask yourself this because I don't think anyone ever thinks about the place that they live in, right? So many people just end up someplace or they end up near where they grew up or they like, but the terminology I always think about is they end up there. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't like a choice that they intentionally chose or thought about or took exercise on to figure out.
So where did that then lead you? Because you went on an interesting journey that I loved because it spoke to who I am as the dreamer and the creator. And I remember myself living in Cincinnati, and similar to you, I got out of a relationship and all of a sudden I looked and my friends around me were married and they're starting to have kids. And here's Rob, a 20-something single dude. And I'm like, I've got a lot more living to do. And I dreamed of working in Chicago and living in Chicago and all that was there. And I made it happen. And for me, I was laser focused on one area, but you took a different path. And what was that?
Yeah. So what ended up happening was complicated story. Relationship ended, but we had been living together. So moved out of that apartment. And this happened just before the pandemic started. And so I put all my stuff, actually I sold 90% of what I owned. Everything I own is in a 10 by 10 storage unit, which is primarily just like books. I think I got a mattress and a desk. That's about it. And so, yeah, so I was like, okay, well, initially I was just going to go on a little trip. I was going to be, a couple months of just traveling and then come back to LA and figure out, wherever I was going to land at that point. Well, I left my apartment the last day of February of 2020. As we all know, a few weeks later, lockdown happens. And so I get stuck. And I say stuck, it wasn't like not in a bad way stuck, but I get stuck because like all my travel plans got canceled, right? Like I'm not flying anywhere. Like I was like, I don't like, when everything started, we were all kind of like, holy crap, this is not good. And so I ended up for 4 months in Pensacola, Florida with my business partner. And during that time and watching everything that's happening and seeing what's happening in LA, I was finally like, do I need to go back to LA? Like that was the plan, sure. But I hadn't really thought it through. Like there was no intentionality behind it. It was just, well, I've been in LA, so I'm going to go back to LA. And so then I said, well, if I'm not going to go back to LA, if that's not going to happen, well, where do I want to go? And now all of a sudden the whole world opened up and I was like, okay, well, I could go anywhere, right? And I was like, well, I still want to stay in the United States. I think just for a lot of reasons that was important to me. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to stay here, I got to be somewhere warm. I can't do, after 20 years of growing up in Buffalo, New York, like I can't, can't do the cold anymore. And so I started, like I said, intentionally saying, okay, here's the things that are important to me and wherever I live. What places have those things? And so after I ended up leaving Pensacola, so it was that summer of 2020, over the next 14 months or so, well, actually about 11 months really, I traveled to about 200 and I don't know, it's like 227 cities, I think is what Google actually ended up telling me was the count. And a lot of them I would just like, drive through. It wasn't necessarily like, hey, I like stayed in the city and like really, because I was looking for a feeling. And I can't tell you even today exactly what that was, but I know it when I feel it. I know it when I see it. And I knew I would find it when I did. And so I spent all that time going around and checking places out. And there was a handful of places that really stuck out to me. And so I made a point to go back to all those places and spend some time in each one of them. And Austin ended up being the place that I felt right. I don't know how else to describe it. Like there was just a good energy and vibe that permeated. Like I could just be sitting here doing absolutely nothing and I just feel happy for no reason at all. And I was like, okay, I got to pursue this. But the other thing that I want to say, and this is really interesting, is I gave myself 2 months in these different cities to really kind of get a feel for it, right? Like, you can say, hey, you can come through for a weekend, but you're not going to necessarily experience a city in that time. And I think that's important too, is being able to say, hey, is this the place that I really want to, plant roots and be at for another 10, 15, 20, maybe longer years.
I love your process on this and your ability to explore. And I know exactly what you feel like around the energy and the vibe and intuition. And it's similar to when you're looking to buy a house or rent an apartment, that literally the second you walk in the door, you don't need to see anything else. It's just a very binary yes or a no. And then what unfolds from there. And Bob, I think there's going to be a segment of people who are inspired by what you just said, but then I think there's going to be a self-limiting voice that says, yeah, but you know what? Bob's different than I am in my situation, ... And they're going to create the reason for why they cannot do it. And I always think about one of my favorite quotes: if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And that has always served me well, because it's a reminder for me to always live in action and to always ask and even do bigger things that things people have ever thought of before. And I think similar to your journey right there, that a lot of people, when thinking about lifestyle design, we get very comfortable. We live by default and we'll create reasons and excuses for why not. Well, you know what, Bob? Timing's not right now. The pandemic's going on. Or you know what, Bob? Right now, I've got a stable job and the job market just looks a little bit crazy. And insert any number of self-limiting excuses for why these things cannot happen. What do you say to someone, whether it's a decision on where to move or any other myriad of life choices that you could be making, where that voice is being the one that is making the most noise?
Absolutely. And that's a huge voice. And by the way, I'll say not only is it someone else's, like someone's internal voice that might be saying this, but they might be hearing it from other people too. I know a ton of people were like, wait, you're going to move to a city where you don't know anybody, like, like the external voices in addition. And look, at the end of the day, I always say, what's going to be best for you? No one's looking out for you the way that you are. No one cares about you the way that you care about yourself. And, obviously for some of you, you might have, a job, you might have a spouse, kids, and these are all considerations that you have to take into, to account. For me, I was single and had nothing, no attachment. So obviously that makes things a little bit easier, but nonetheless, you have to look at it from this way. You only get this one life, this one chance, this one shot at doing whatever you want. So why spend it being unhappy or at the very least unfulfilled? Because you only got, every day is gone. What do you have to show for it? Like, you have to take that chance. You have to go out there. You have to make it happen. And the other thing that I think you'll find is that when you are truly aligned with your purpose and your reason, and you are in cue with what you're supposed to be doing, a few things are going to happen, because it has every single time for me. Number one is you just feel better. And I can't just, if you haven't experienced it, you're going to be happier. You're going to be more energized. You're going to be excited. And you'll find more of your days are better for that way. That's number one. Number two, that happiness is going to spread around you in a way that you've never experienced before. The simple fact that I only knew one person when I came here to Austin, and now I have a bunch of people that I know. And the reason for that is, look, as a dog, as kids, right? You used to be like, hey, you're the same age as me. Let's be friends, right? Like, that's how it worked. But as adults, you don't do that. People get weirded out if you walk up and say, hey, let's be friends, right? But your energy, if you're in alignment and you're happy and you're excited and all those things are true for you, your energy and vibe is going to resonate to everyone else. And they're going to want to spend time with you. They're going to want to be your friend if you don't know anybody there. They're going to want to hang out with you because people are attracted to that positive energy. It's like a gravity well that sucks them in. And so I think you'll find those things. And when those things happen for you, it becomes infinitely more easy to make big changes, whether it be in a location, a job, a career, starting a business, whatever the choice is.
Well, Bob, I would like to thank you for creating a soundbite for the value of the coaching, of why I do the things that I do, from the energy and the vibe that you can create for yourself, the lens that you show up in the world, the action that you take, and how you become the mirror for the rest of your experience. Like creates like or attracts like. So the way that you show up, and while you were saying all of this, I was reminded of the world is working in your favor. And when you make these life choices, as risky, scary, bold, uncertain as they may be, guess what? The world wants you to succeed. And I have two things in my mind that stand out of instances in which this was true for me. Number one, without a doubt, seismic shift in my life was when I quit my corporate job selling digital advertising sales to go all in at living my dreams of working in sports and being a creator and starting Bacon Sports. And what was the voice in the narrative in my head? It said, I would regret this for the rest of my life if I didn't give it a shot at making my dreams happen. So often people are like, well, what was it like when you made that decision? The bigger risk for me was not taking the risk, because I was removing if I had only ... from my life excuse bucket. And how many people are willing to do that? I had to know. I just had to know. And then number two for me, right. So after that, I'm on my own entrepreneurial journey, but I've been a bro my entire life. Work hard, play hard, living with my fraternity friends, like all of this. And at some point, I was tired of living the single bro life. All I wanted was a relationship. Well, guess what? It just so happens that I met a girl on a ski trip in Switzerland. I was like, this girl is going to be my wife. but she lives in Orlando. I live in Chicago, and I've only known her for 10 days. Well, guess what? I decided to move to Orlando to see about a girl. Why? Because I'd been trolling the bar scene for so many years that when I finally found that diamond in the world that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, I went all in. People are like, what are you doing? I was like, I don't care if I don't know anyone. I'm moving to Orlando, Florida. How terrible could be moving to Orlando? It was incredible. It was the greatest thing in my life. And of course, I met my wife. But guess what I never had to do? Say, if I had only pursued that relationship or pursued my dream of doing whatever it is that I want. And this is where my zeal and energy for life comes from, of lifestyle design. And when you realize you only live once, and we can create this story in action, in narrative, in actual life that we want, why would you ever do anything other than the most amazing life ever?
Why? Why would you?
Crazy.
Well, you know what's funny is you as soon as that happens for you and you realize it's possible, then every other door opens up, right? Like now it's free game for you to create the life you want, and all you have to do is simply say, I'm going to.
Right, exactly. So one of the things in our post-show conversation, we talked about the story of creating your own life and living by design, but also the inverse. People floating not by design. And it is one of, if not the biggest things that I fight against, or I stand on my perch of how much of the world is on autopilot and allowing news, email, social media, TV, Netflix, everything to control our attention. Because for me, time is my most valuable resource, but so is my attention. And how you start your day will set the tone for how the rest of it goes. And how quickly do you allow the world to determine your thoughts, your attention, and everything going in there. And I want everyone to realize the power that we hold. And if you just live the life by default, that it's going to be a very average or boring. It's going to be comfortable, and you might have some nice up and down things. But imagine, hearing what's in Bob's voice and in my voice of living a life on fire where you're like, I am so excited for doing something scary.
Right. And here's the crazier thing. It's literally never in the history of humankind been easier to be conscious and intentional about what you're putting into your head and what you're listening to and all of that. You talk about, hey, like not letting news and all this other crap in, right? It made me think, just last week, I went and saw a guy named Jordan Peterson live, right? And I was thinking about, like, here's a guy that I'd never heard of a month ago until a friend of mine here was like, oh, you got to listen to this guy. I think you'd like him. And now all of a sudden, like, here I am watching his YouTube videos, diving in, and he's a super intellectual gentleman. And as you were talking, it just got me thinking, it's like, man, like, I don't like, imagine even 30, 40 years ago, right? Like if you wanted to get information, you had to go to a college, or you had to go, maybe go to a library, but you had to know what you're looking for. Like, whereas now I can literally just say, oh, I want to learn about this. I pop on the internet and bam, there'll be, 5,000 videos that talk about just that thing. And I can choose and be intentional about what I'm feeding into my brain. And I think that's just such a cool thing when we talk about being intentional and we talk about creating the lifestyle that you want.
And what does your process look like for that? Because I think, Bob, there is an element of this is too hard, or you guys can be unrelatable in the way that you've created these processes for yourselves. Because even though at no time in the world has it been easier to live information by design, it has also never been harder in the history of the world, because at no point has there ever been more choices in information pushed to us. Not like a series of library books. They're just gonna jump out and be like, oh my God, I got hit by a book today. No, it's like the world is coming out. And what does your process look like this? Because I think it's extremely valuable and interesting to know how we create the guardrails or barriers to entry to get into our orbit.
Yeah. So for me, anytime I'm consuming information, I want to know, I want to know both sides of what I'm reading, right? What's the good, what's the bad, and all of that. Because I found, this is what I found, particularly when consuming information, and this is, in my opinion, true whether it be political information, whether it be intellectual information, whether it be even business related information, right? Like, hey, here's how you're supposed to do this thing on Facebook, for example, or whatever, right? Like, I want to know all the sides because I understand that the truth is almost always somewhere in the middle, and if you're looking at, hey, there's never, it's true, there's never been harder in the sense of there's so much information out there, and obviously you have to limit yourself to what you can, but take a look at all the sides and then decide for yourself where you want to go. And I think that's the most important thing people don't do. And I shouldn't say people, but I've seen a lot of folks lately not make decisions because they decided on it. They're making decisions because someone else has told them this thing. They heard it on a news, on a post. A friend was talking about it at dinner the other night, whatever. And now all of a sudden their ideology becomes mine, not for any other reason than simply I allowed it to supplant what I already had there. Or, it supplanted nothing that was there. And so just, again, intentionality. I know we keep talking about that, but be intentional about consuming the information and saying, is this something that I've decided for me to be true, or that I want to believe in, or that I want to pursue, or that I want to go do? So long as that's the case, then have at it.
Bob, and I love it because this is what we're going to end on, is their ideology becomes mine versus I create my ideology of who I am. So foundational to who I am, how I coach, and how I show up in the world every single day. It starts with, what does the best version of Rob Cressy look like? And then I write that down, and then I speak it out loud every single day. So now my thoughts and my heart and my actions are all aligned. So it's no longer the world determines what my ideology is. And this is the gift I want to give everybody, is when you realize you have the ability to design not only where you live, but how you show up every single day. Your ability to be full of love, be generous, be a force of attraction, be unstoppable, you name it. When you understand the power you have to put on whatever cape and have that be true to who you are, and you create your own ideology that allows you to create that freedom, to create that love, to create whatever it is that you want in your life, man, it is like the world goes from black and white to color. And if this is something that interests you, hit a brother up, Rob at robcressy.com. I live in this world. I coach in this world. Bob, give us some final thoughts on this.
Look, just Nike that. Just do it, right? Like, make that decision. What I, like, if you were thinking about moving, do it. Starting a business, do it. Leaving a business, do it. Selling a business, do it. Changing your job or your career, do it. Like, there's never been an easier time to find what suits you and make sure that you can create the life you want. So just make it happen.
I love that. Let's just Nike it. Boom. That is amazing. Bob, I'm inspired by you and your journey. I love being around other creators who build the world in their image and they make it happen. Where can everybody connect with you?
You can find me at thebobmcintosh.com or on any social channel at thebobmcintosh, and McIntosh is spelled MC, no A in there. Just find me. I'm the only bright red-headed guy named Bob McIntosh, so I stand out.
Absolutely love it. And I want to hear from you. One, is there a decision in your mind right now that you've been thinking about? If so, I want to hear about it so Bob and I can support you in that. You can hit me up on all social media platforms at Rob Cressy. And once again, if you want to build an ideology by design where you show up as the best version of yourself every single day, where you're in control, hit me up. Go to robcressy.com or email me, rob at robcressy.com.